The Sunset Strip Diaries, Chapter 7. The Sunset Strip. Sunset Boulevard. What was the big deal, you ask? Well, technically, it was only a street that ran from downtown Los Angeles to Malibu. It dead ends into the Pacific Ocean. The famous spot known as the Strip is the mile-and-a-half portion of it from Doheny Drive to North Crescent Heights. Incidentally, the intersection of Sunset and Crescent Heights was a special spot for my family. My great-grandparents owned a beauty salon there back in the 1940s and early 50s. The first buildings went up around Sunset Plaza in the mid-1920s. The area was not part of the city of Los Angeles back in the day, so it wasn't as heavily watched by the police. Alcohol, which was illegal during Prohibition, was served there, and casinos popped up around the area because it didn't count as part of the city. You could technically gamble in the country, quote-unquote, but not the city. So it was the seedy, crazy part of town which attracted many people working in the film industry. The area became more glamorous in the 30s and 40s when restaurants and nightclubs popped up. In the 30s, there was the black-tie, French-themed Café Troubadour, where everyone went to jitterbug under hand-painted murals of the Paris skyline. Fred Astaire, Bing Crosby, and Jean Harlow frequented the spot, among hundreds of other big names. In the 40s, there was the green, silk-draped Ciro's, which later became the Comedy Store, where many stars dined, danced, and got themselves into the gossip columns. Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, Lana Turner, even President Kennedy dined at the Baroque-decorated club. There was the Latin American-themed Mocambo, with its light blue interior and bright red columns, which had glass cages of live parrots lining the walls. Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald performed their acts there, and patrons included Howard Hughes, Elizabeth Taylor, and Bob Hope. Although that old Hollywood heyday was over, the Sunset Strip was still the most glamorous spot for a girl into old film stars and current rock stars to set foot. I was nervous sitting in the car with Jimmy, my boyfriend, and Christabel, my childhood best friend. The traffic was completely stopped in a big jam the whole way up the Strip that night. It was very dark out there, but there were so many lights twinkling from cars' taillights and nightclub signs that everything was lit up in reds, blues, and pinks. I looked out of the car window and I saw crowds of cool people all talking and laughing while passing one another on the sidewalks. It was like a huge street party. Some people were yelling to their friends across the street, and others were just jaywalking through the traffic jams, shouting at their friends in cars. I saw tons of cute guys, pretty girls, and lots of backlit marquees advertising bands that were playing at this place or that place. 8x10 pieces of neon paper were stapled to every phone pole and littered the ground like huge chunks of confetti in hot pink, acid green, lemon yellow, and bright turquoise blue. They were band flyers. Band members passed them out to everyone walking by to try and get them to go to their performances. The flyers had the show date and time on them, along with a promo picture of the band. I really wanted to get out and walk around in the crowds, but I didn't want Jimmy to come with me because he always seemed to be getting into altercations when he went out to Hollywood. He very often came home with a black eye or a smashed jaw due to some disrespectful utterances muttered by drunken clubgoers. He told me stories of what he could remember. Some guy said he looked like a fag, or someone messed with one of his friends and he had to stand up for them. Many of the instances sounded completely foolish, and few warranted actual fights from what I could decipher. I hoped the fact that we would be inside the rainbow would tame some of the violence that might be provoked out on the streets. I wore a very risque outfit that night, something along the lines of what I had seen in the local magazines featuring cat house girls. I thought, okay, this is the spot where I can do this. I borrowed a black bejeweled bustier from Christabel and paired it with a tiny black skirt, very high black shoes, and huge hoop earrings. Christabel wore a tight purple crushed velvet dress with a spiked belt and huge cross earrings that sank into her long blonde hair. She looked very cool and at least had her stomach covered. I had a completely bare midriff. I assumed everyone would be half naked in there, and I wanted my debut to be perfect, as always. Well, Jimmy valeted his car. We got out. We went up to the crowded line at the front of the Rainbow. It's actually the side of the Rainbow. It looked like a small English Tudor house with a big vertical sign that was striped in rainbow colors with black lettering over it. I could hear rock music brazenly blasting from the open door, Rocket Queen from Guns N' Roses. I was shaking. I thought of the things I had heard about the Rainbow, such as the fact that John Belushi ate his last meal there. I knew Led Zeppelin used to hang there, as well as John Lennon, Ringo Starr. Even Elvis went there. But before that, the place was once a restaurant with some other name. Judy Garland's director husband, Vincent Minnelli, owned it. He proposed to her there. Judy Garland! She was in this establishment, and Marilyn Monroe met Joe DiMaggio there on a blind date. Marilyn Monroe! Charlie Chaplin and John Wayne even ate there, but more important to me was the fact that in the 1980s, the Rainbow was the hangout of Motley Crue, Rat, and Guns N' Roses. It was a combination of old Hollywood history and new Hollywood, and I was standing there in front of it. I was beaming, secretly, of course. I can't remember if Christabel and I had fake IDs at that point, or they just let us in without ID, or what. I think that technically you could eat in the restaurant if you were under 21. You just weren't supposed to drink. Anyway, I was 16 and she was 15, but nobody gave a shit. And may I please note for the record that I am sure this fine establishment is much different today and plays by the rules. We're talking a long time ago. Okay, so we finally walked outside past a man in a suit with a carnation in his lapel. It was very crowded, very dark, and the music was even louder. I hung on to Jimmy and held Christabel with my other hand as I passed mutton-chopped Lemmy from Motorhead in a denim jacket. I was afraid I would get lost and never see the light of day again. There was a main room with a big blazing fireplace and about 20 big red leather booths filled with people. Rock and roll memorabilia was crammed onto the walls, gold records, guitars, autographed pictures. It was kind of like the Hard Rock Cafe in a way, except that the rock stars actually hung out at the Rainbow. The place looked like an Italian restaurant underneath all of the paraphernalia. There were red glowing candle jars and big pizzas at each table. People could barely get out of the booths because every inch of walking space was taken up by crowds of rockers. It was wall-to-wall packed, to the point that your body was up against other people, not unlike the bus that I took home from school. There was a downstairs bar behind the fireplace, and then there were stairs heading upward to another story. Upstairs there were bathrooms, and then another stairway to go even further upstairs to a dance floor and another bar. It was as if there were a million dark tunnels in there. I remember hearing that the little secret loft upstairs, which was even up more little stairs, it looked like a little treehouse in there, I was told, that was called the Lair of the Hollywood Vampires. That was a spot where Alice Cooper, Keith Moon, and their buddies partied when they came to town back in the day. As I looked around, I realized that I was actually a little too sleazy looking. The girls were not that naked. They were in dresses and whatnot, but they were not showing as much as I was. I got it wrong, and I was embarrassed for the millionth time in my life. And I got drunk because I was really nervous. How many doors would I walk through completely overdone until I got the hint? Geez, I felt a little better after a few Long Island iced teas, and that's when I asked Jimmy for his lip service jacket, and I decided to cover myself. I couldn't believe I was there, the one and only Rainbow Bar and Grill, meeting place of every rock star on the planet. It was in tons of music videos, and there I was, me, 11th grade, 16 years old, amongst crowds of cool people. I looked at a collage on the wall of different stars partying. I wanted to savor the moment. It was pretty sketchy how we kids were having cocktails, but hey, that's Hollywood. If you look good, you're in. So anyway, as the night went on, the parking lot between the Rainbow and the Roxy, which was next door, started to fill with people. I didn't know until later that it was the spot where many people scored drugs at 2 a.m. We walked through the parking lot at closing time. The Rainbow played Sweet Child of Mine as their last call song around 1:30. I was feeling bold and brazen after several cocktails, and I decided I wanted to show off, so I took off the jacket. And immediately a bunch of guys whistled and started to make comments about me. Jimmy started yelling at them and challenging them to a fight, which I talked him out of. I was like, what are you going to do, take on 10 guys by yourself? Am I supposed to be your backup here in my high heels? My 15-year-old friend? Ignore it. He started fights with any man who whistled at me, which was basically everyone. Even blind motherfuckers were whistling at me. Old men, young men, gay men, monks. The whole world was whistling at me, and this poor guy tried to defend me. The thing that really sucked for him is that he couldn't fight. He was always getting beat up. That never stopped him, though. Jimmy didn't want to take me anywhere in Hollywood for a while after that. Christabel was asking and asking, when can we go next? I didn't have an answer. We decided we had to take matters into our own hands. We were determined to get down to Sunset by ourselves and party on the glittered sidewalks. It was too delicious to pass up, too exciting not to return. Christabel got us a ride down there one summer night. We got to the Strip, parked somewhere. I got out. We all got out and started walking up the street. I was finally trotting up that world-famous Sunset Strip. I no longer had to read about it in my bedroom. I didn't have to look at it from a car window. I was there breathing in the cigarette smoke, perfume, and the scent of leather. I was exhilarated and scared at the same time. I watched musicians passing out their colorful flyers in the warm summer air, smiling and being friendly, probably because they kind of had to if they wanted people to come to their shows, but still. It dawned on me that the Sunset Strip crowd was different from what I saw of the Cat House crowd. I thought they were one and the same, but no. The Cat House guys were a little older, a little darker, and bikeresque. They were not into the glam look. They were more into the LA Guns look, black leather pants, dyed black hair, maybe a little bit of eyeliner, but no other makeup, and a lot more tattoos. Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee at that time were more Cat House. The Strip was a younger, more colorful candy store full of cartoon characters in more costumed attire. They wore lots of makeup, lots of hairspray, and most of all, lots of color in their clothes and accessories. They were a lot more happy and light. They were less threatening. They were more about the party. The night was magical. It was a freak show combined with a rock video, combined with a beauty pageant. I had never laid eyes on so many creative, extraordinary people. Because I was wearing black that night, no one even looked at me. There were beautiful, tan, blonde girls in pink and sexy brunettes in white. There were so many better figures than mine, so many girls with longer hair, longer legs, and bigger smiles. This wasn't going to be easy. I realized at that moment that I had never seen pictures of the people on the actual Strip. The local magazines showed pictures of people inside clubs and watching shows, and those magazines were all in black and white. It was a lot crazier in real life, and I started to take mental notes. As we walked down near the Rainbow, an old guy pulled up in a sparkly, bright purple Excalibur. It was one of those long cars that had a spare tire on the front. A real old-fashioned looking long car. He got out of the car in a purple hat and a sparkling purple jacket with a lit-up, beating heart glowing through it at his chest. He had long, frizzy white hair. He looked like a wizard or something, and if that wasn't weird enough, a cat jumped onto his shoulder from inside the car. He was walking around the Strip doing card tricks, and that cat just sat quietly on him the whole time. It was truly bizarre. I'm pretty sure that cat was in the Rainbow with him also. The guy's name was Fig, and the cat's name tag said Figgy. Most of the guys on the Strip were stunning. Some had bronze tans and long, super pale, champagne blonde hair, wrapped with a pink scarf. They had exaggerated beauty spots penciled in above a lip, eyes lined in blue or black, and bubblegum lip gloss on their lips. Some wore scrunchies in their hair. It was 1990, y'all. Or those plastic rainbow charm bracelets on their wrists. I think my sister had one of those when she was 9. Other guys had their hair half up and half down like a girl. Some wore clips in their hair or bandanas tied up into a knot on top. Some were wearing blazers in dark pinks or purples. Some wore polka-dotted or striped headbands. I saw a guy with long, straight flamingo pink hair who wore black and white checkered tights under his shorts that were cut off at the knee. Another had a turquoise blue hairstyle and a leather jacket with bright candy airbrushed on the back. They were amazing. It was as if I were back in my 10-year-old bedroom looking at a bunch of pink and glitter and neon. It was a potpourri of 80s new wave, circus clowns, and Vogue spreads. There were other types too. There were black-haired guys with a punk vibe who wore bondage pants and torn t-shirts. Many of them had tattooed arms like the Cat House guys, but the difference was that their tats were not skulls, flames, and devils. They were cartoons like Bugs Bunny or Betty Boop. They were about as hardcore as a unicorn. I heard some of the names through the crowd. There was a definite theme going on with the names. Lots of Jamies, Billies, Barbies, Rickies, and Johnnies. I thought, damn, I haven't heard these names since Cool It Now by New Edition. I also heard some other girly names like Candy, Holly, Ginger. I could have sworn they were names of guys, but I wasn't sure. There was sort of a scale of gayness, for me at least. Some of the guys looked way too much like women. They were too close to being transsexuals, and I would have felt gay had I hooked up with any of them. Many of them were walking a fine line, but still man enough to want to screw as many girls as possible. There was really something for everyone there. Many different levels. Guns N' Roses and Poison had recently made it big by first playing the Strip in the clubs, along with bands like Rat, Van Halen, and several others. Bands from all around the country came to LA to play the same club circuit in hopes of drawing attention from record labels. These were bands from Detroit, New York, Boston, everywhere. Many musicians moved to LA alone and created their own bands once they got there. They went through the want ads in Rock City News and BAM and auditioned potential bandmates. Some bands were looking for serious musicians, but many were looking for guys who had the right look. Once they got something together and named their band, they got to work on practicing for shows and promoting. It felt like Halloween on the Strip when the bands passed out their flyers because they each had their own little theme. I felt like we were all trick-or-treating. There were bands with a beachy theme, some with a gypsy theme, and others with a kids' cartoon theme. I saw variations of punk and glam, vampire and glam, and plain old beauty school dropout glam. They each had their own vision, their own brand, and their own marketing and publicity ideas. I was a big fan of candy and toy packaging, so I really appreciated the work that bands put into their themes. I loved the bubble letters, the stars, the glitter, the candy, the kiss marks, lightning bolts, and leopard skin. I felt like it was what my teenage life had been missing. This creativity, this imaginativeness. This scene was not just music to me, and it wasn't really just about cute guys. It was about people who were into their art, into their creations, into making something out of nothing. These people not only loved music, but they recreated themselves. They deconstructed clothes to make a new look. They made their own rules and their own scene. It was wild, it was shocking, it was adventurous, and the creativity level was at such a high that it was electric. I had a deep respect for these interesting people, not to mention fire in my underwear for a few of them, because they left their hometowns to come to Hollywood, and they were convinced they would survive. There was only a small percentage of people in the population who actually thought they could get away with something that risky, and it was a certain personality type, the type that left their comfort zones and marched straight into the unknown, completely exposed. And it was that spark that rose from the crowds of people on Sunset. One of the first bands Christabel and I saw passing out flyers was named Drop Dead Gorgeous, and this is a different band than the one that is out today, just has the same name. Anyway, these guys, two of them were really handsome, but wearing bright red lipstick. They had really long black hair and wore all black clothing, but they were still masculine somehow. Their theme appeared to be glamorous vampires. One of the guys was named Lauren. He looked right past me and was instantly taken with Christabel. I thought he was drop-dead gorgeous and was immediately jealous, painfully jealous. Well, she got into flirt mode and snagged him straight away. I kind of felt down and defeated the rest of that night. Was I pretty enough for this place? Christabel ended up dating Lauren in the coming weeks. One night we went to their show at the Coconut Teaser, which was on the corner of Crescent Heights and Sunset Boulevard. I believe it was painted purple at the time in honor of the Zeros, an all-purple-haired band playing there. Even though it wasn't close to the other clubs, it was one of the spots that all the bands played. Same thing with the Troubadour on Santa Monica Boulevard. The Teaser had a big flight of stairs that you had to climb to get into the front door. It was super dark inside, and there was a tiny little stage that was really close to the ground. It felt like someone was just doing karaoke in your living room. There were all sorts of little nooks and crannies in the place, kind of like the Rainbow. There was an outside patio overlooking the huge intersection, a dance floor off in another room, and a few different bars. I was less nervous than I would have been in the Roxy or a place with a bigger stage and more people in the audience, but I was still kind of scared. Scared that I looked like a geek, scared that I wasn't acting cool, all of that. Drop Dead Gorgeous played their show, and we tried to show support without looking like morons. I was thinking, should I bop my head to the beat? Should I smile? Not smile? Lean against something? Not even watch? We ended up standing there looking like bitches. We thought we looked older if we didn't talk or smile. Out of the corner of my eye, I tried to look around the room to see if I was dressed like any of the other people. I guessed I was in a way, but I was playing it too safe. I was in black again, and I went completely unnoticed. I could not seem to strike a good balance. I was either way overdressed or completely invisible. I was secretly mesmerized by the guys in Drop Dead Gorgeous and very interested in seeing how they operated in the daytime. How did they live? Did they have regular jobs? Did they hang upside down like bats to sleep? Well, I found out soon enough. Christabel and I started to go over to their place so she could see Lauren. They all lived in a one-bedroom scumbag apartment on de Longpre in Hollywood. It was in a bad area, total crack central, not to mention a major pickup place for male hustlers. Anyway, I used to sit on their couch and just stare at all of them getting ready to go play a gig. They'd all get around one mirror in the place and get real serious while they applied their makeup. They had pictures of the Munsters, Elvira, and Tracy Lords all over the place. I guess those were their inspirations, and fine ones at that. In the daytime, they all laid around in shorts with their stringy hair sticking to their bony backs. Well, they all had bony backs except for the singer, who was rather chubby, bless his heart. He must have been able to sing somewhat. I don't remember. He wore vests over white frilly shirts and had long frizzy hair. I used to love the rush of excitement before Christabel and I got to their door. Kevin, the cute bassist, who loved the red-headed 1980s teen singer, Tiffany, I think we're alone now, Tiffany, lit up when I came in. He would look at me and say, "Good God!" He always bluntly flattered me, so I started to wear skimpier clothing to try and elicit more compliments from him. And once I got a reaction, I would then feel guilty and cover up with a black jacket in case word got back to Jimmy that I was some wild woman about town. I didn't really want to publicly disrespect him. Christabel and I started going to the Strip every weekend. While we were getting ready, we listened to Slaughter's Stick It To Ya album, namely the song Fly to the Angels, and Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood album. There was a band called Nelson who had a hit called After the Rain. I didn't really care for them. That always played on the new station in LA, Pirate Radio 100.3. The song Epic by Faith No More was big, and so was What It Takes by Aerosmith. We lounged by Christabel's pool during the day, Me in a zebra print bikini and a pink scrunchie in my dark hair, and she in a neon orange bikini and her blonde hair piled into a bun. Sometimes we listened to the regular mainstream music like Madonna's Vogue or Mariah Carey's Vision of Love, which Christabel belted so loud in her backyard that it shriveled the goddamn plants. Laying there in the California sunshine, daydreaming about the Strip and eating raspberries from a cut crystal bowl, ooh, I felt that my life was as good as it could get. I started to notice the ins and outs of Hollywood pretty quickly. As I was always sort of a spy wherever I went, I was good at spotting details and trends. The Sunset Strip scene was nothing like hanging around Jeff Hunter in the Valley. There was a definite set of rules to follow. First off, very few Hollywood guys would ever have a name like Jeff, besides Jeff from Bad Blood. If they did, they would change it to JJ or something cuter. They rarely had natural blonde or natural brown hair. That was the kiss of death. Their hair had to be platinum white blonde or dyed jet blue black and at least past their shoulders. The colors could not be natural, only unnatural, and that included streaks of pink, purple, or blue. If you had any sort of curl in your hair, you were out. It had to be straight. Many ads for musicians looking for bandmates said straight out, no brown hairs. Most guys on the Strip that year were considered glam rock. They wore eyeliner at the very least, and at the most a full face of makeup, including that beauty spot and lipstick. Glam guys were very skinny and not muscular in any way. Their bodies were almost all the same. Very long stick legs and tight black pants and lanky slouching torsos in colorful glittery shirts. They rarely had chest hair. Nobody even had facial hair. You're thinking, wait a second, they sound like girls. You would be correct. They looked exactly like women. I don't know what that says about me and all of the other girls memorized by them, but think what you will. If you were a guy with curly hair, you were fucked. If you were not skinny, you were fucked. If you were hairy, you were fucked. I mean, I realized at that point that Drop Dead Gorgeous, who I thought were so great, were on the not cool list for having that singer who had brown wavy hair. You had to look like a supermodel just to be a guy on the Strip. You can imagine how difficult it was to be a girl. Anyone could go to the Strip. It was public property. But to get in with the in crowd, you had to have something they wanted. And that was either 1, beauty, 2, status, or 3, money. Usually the face was most important, followed by youth and a hot body. There was no reason for anyone to be overweight or unattractive. Those people were not even allowed to be present. And mind you, anyone listening to this, I'm not some supermodel myself reading this. This was like 30 years ago. This is how it was. If there was ever a fat person hanging in that crowd, you can bet your left ball that they had money. I know. Sounds like I'm being a jerk right now, but it's true. A few overweight chicks were wealthy enough to buy their way in. The guys were always poor and were always very money-grubbing, so if a girl was 300 pounds and was willing to shell out money for the musician's expenses, she was allowed to hang out. It would be low profile, of course, so as not to upset their image, but they would not turn down money from what I saw. And it was not just buying them drinks, oh hell no. It was literally paying the guys rent or getting an apartment and letting the guys live in it for free and keeping the fridge filled. One large chick in particular was called Esmeralda, and she had very wealthy parents. She bought one platinum-haired glam rocker a Corvette. I am serious. Most musicians lived with some sort of boring girl who wouldn't give them too much trouble and was generally just happy to be in their presence. Those girls would always fall in love with them, and then that made it difficult for the guys to date anyone or even just hang out with girls like me. The girls that became actual girlfriends to the guys on the Strip were usually beautiful and rich. Just being beautiful was not enough. I had it pointed out to me very bluntly by a popular guy about a year later who had just discovered me in his crowd at a party. He walked up to me and he said, "I like your lips. You're beautiful. You want a boyfriend?" Yeah. I said, seeing where it went, because he was so sought after. Where do you work? He asked me. I told him the truth. A beauty supply store. How much do you make? $5.50 an hour. I added on 50 cents like that would make a difference. Never mind, he said, and he walked away, just leaving me standing there with my mouth hanging open. In most crowds, men are chasing after females, and the females are picking and choosing who they want. In this crowd, it was a very high ratio of women competing for a tiny ratio of men. The men were pursued. They had women throwing themselves at them. I saw how disposable the women were, and I didn't want to be like that. I already felt bad enough about myself for my earlier indiscretions. I knew it could be a landmine of even worse situations if I didn't watch out. And luckily, I had a boyfriend, so I did not have to get into any of those situations with guys. Regardless, I could tell it would be very hard to be a respected woman in that crowd. It seemed pretty impossible, laughable even. I was nervous about how I would carry out my plan. One night, Christabel and I ran into a guy I used to know through the Casey crowd named Michael Michelle. He was called Mikey at that time, but for all intents and purposes, I will use the name Michael because that's what he later changed it to. He told us that everyone was going to the Swingin' Things show at the Roxy that weekend. They were the new It Band, and all the cool people would be there. Christabel and I agreed we had to go. I was secretly thrilled that I could finally watch the main players and the cliques firsthand. I could stand among them myself. I had seen those Swingin' Thing flyers, and they looked so fun and so cool. This was it. We showed up at the Roxy trying to act all cool and unimpressed. I was terribly excited to be there, but I was sure I had to hide such foolishness. We went inside, and it was super loud and very dark, and the people I could see appeared to be smiling and colorfully dressed, and beach balls were being passed around in the crowd by tan girls with long blonde hair and chalky pink, almost white lips that kind of glowed in the dark. They were wearing little outfits of peach and yellow and rose, little cute dresses, and they didn't look as sleazy as most of the other girls I saw. I later found out they were all from a beach town in Orange County called Huntington Beach. I looked around at the rest of the audience, and it seemed as if every big band was there networking. Michael and his friends were walking around, talking to people, not really watching the show. No one who was cool would go to the front of the stage. They all stood back by the bar and socialized. Swingin' Thing songs were about surfing and doing it with the lights on. They even sampled the Beastie Boys' New Style. I gathered that I was not supposed to be paying attention to the band, so I tried not to stand there staring. But inside, I thought they were really talented and different. I actually really liked them. They didn't sound like suicidal Scandinavians or angry bikers. They were cute and happy and sexy. I looked out into the crowd. Everyone was drinking, laughing, and tossing the beach balls. I was sold. I don't think I have ever been so sold. I definitely felt they were more my cup of tea than what Jimmy was doing. He could go ahead and go out without me. I had found my place, my very own scene. I wanted to be nowhere else. Jimmy was still going to his own spots, and after a while Christabel stopped wanting to go out as much as I did, so I started hanging out with Michael. Now, I don't know if this is because I was unintentionally visualizing what I wanted until it came into being or what, but very shortly after running into Michael on the Strip, he moved into a condo only a few blocks from where I lived with my grandmother. A guy named Dusty owned the place and needed roommates, so Michael moved in along with a guy named Raz. Raz was a big part of my Hollywood life. I met him through the Casey crowd initially as well. He had the look of a musician, very thin, very tall, with, let's all say it together now, long black hair. And how do I put this? His hair was not exactly luxurious looking, and his skin was not the smoothest skin I've ever seen, and I am sure he would not disagree with me in saying he had a big fucking nose. He was not your typical Adonis. And in spite of all that, he somehow thought he was fabulous and hot. He was so confident with his looks that everyone else believed him and treated him as such. He carried himself as if he was a god, often looking down on other people for their looks. And strangely, he had no problem getting girls and was dating some of the most beautiful women I had ever seen. It was fun to be around him when I looked good, and it was hell to be around him when I was not up to par. If I looked good, he fawned over me and praised me and paraded me in front of everyone saying, "Isn't she hot?" But if I gained weight or if I had split ends, he would let me know immediately. I felt like I was having a sit down with my boss when I was told these things about my looks. It made me very nervous. Raz could not be bothered with anyone who didn't have the look, whatever that was in his head. He called everyone honey, as in, "You just don't have the look, honey," said with raised eyebrows. And he wore women's perfume. One of the greatest nights ever was when he urinated out of a fourth-story window at the palm tree-lined Studio Club on Wilcox, right over the entrance to the building. We were all shocked watching him facing the window. He responded by saying, "That's Hollywood, babe," in his drawn-out, bored voice. Later that night, when he walked out of the doors in the entrance, he slipped so hard he literally caught air, and he landed straight on his back, hard, in a puddle of his own urine. We laughed so hard, we all said, "That's Hollywood, babe," between guffaws and cackles. Michael was also very confident, but in a more friendly way. He didn't make me nervous or scare me like Raz often did. Michael was a tiny little guy with super long black hair and lots of makeup and colorful clothes. He was always laughing and joking and hanging out with whomever was up and coming or whomever was deemed in. He was very social and outgoing, but he excluded anyone who wasn't cool. He always dictated the in crowd. Raz would not be seen with a girl who didn't look like a supermodel, and he had to have some sort of respect for a guy to befriend him, even if it was just for his look. So he was not as easygoing about things. Regardless, they pulled together an in-crowd for the Sunset Strip, linking different people from different bands together and hand-picking pretty girls to join. And most important of all, they were more than willing to pick me up and let me tag along with them to Hollywood on the weekends. It would usually be early evening, the sun still out. After getting ready, I laid there on my messy bed, listening to Hanoi Rocks or Faster Pussycat or Jet Boy, my arms propped up, waiting to see Raz's little red Mazda RX-7 slow down in front of my house at my window. Once I saw that bright red car, I ran outside, excited for the night to begin. Raz was usually wearing sweats and a scrunchie around his wrist. He always started out the evening going over how cool he was, reminding himself of his status as if to pump himself up for the night. It would go something like this: "Honey, let me tell you something. I can't be bothered with someone who doesn't have the look. You know what I mean? I have the look. I look like a rock star. I'm tall, I have great hair, I have the clothes, I have the connections. It's only a matter of time before I'm doing something big." When we got to the condo, I took a seat on the couch. Dusty had a fluffy white Persian cat that looked like it should be eating fancy feast out of a crystal goblet. She chased shadows while the guys chatted about their love lives. Raz would reiterate how beautiful his chicks were, and strangely I would find he was not exaggerating, and how he dated nothing but the best. I nodded. Michael would tell me about girls he had crushes on, asking if he should call or not call, or why they were ignoring him. His voice was pinched and nasally, kind of sounded like a valley girl voice. It sounded like this, like, "What should I do? I like her. I think she goes out with a lot of other guys. Should I tell her I like her, or maybe I should try to make her jealous? That would be cool." Then it was on to a beauty discussion. Michael and I discussed the plucking of brows, and if it were normal to see a lot of hair in the drain when you took a shower. Sometimes Raz would cook dinner and then yell in a shrill voice, "Michael, honey, dinner!" I would then wait for them to get ready for the night out. They drank their beers in the shower and blasted Yaz or Dead or Alive, Michael's two favorite bands. I loved the getting ready time. They sat around with their hair wrapped in petal pink towels, drinking more beer and gossiping. They applied their makeup with a steady hand, lining their eyes and applying lipstick, beauty spots, and mascara. Their hair took a while because it had to be teased and hairsprayed. We all drank until we had a buzz, piled into a car that was blasting music, and got on the 101 freeway heading south. It took about 20 minutes to get to Hollywood, so we continued drinking beers in the car. It was all very exciting. All smashed together on each other's laps, laughing and singing and smacking each other. We zipped around traffic. Franklin to La Brea. La Brea to Fountain. Fountain to La Cienega. La Cienega to Holloway, and then Holloway to Sunset Boulevard. Once we got there, we parked on a side street off the Strip. We drank more beers in the car, then we got out in the dark and walked through the crowd saying hi to their friends, stopping to drink with different people. We went in and out of the Whiskey, the Roxy, the Rainbow, and Gazzari's, not to mention the sushi bar across the street from the Rainbow, Ten Masa. Every single one of those places was always filled past capacity, and we could barely move. We continued through the night, getting increasingly drunk and doing reckless things like crawling over fences, getting in fights, peeing in bushes, or being thrown out of bars. I felt like I was going to the biggest and best rager of the century every single weekend. It was non-stop, and the vibe never died down. Even though there was chaos coming from all sides of me, I felt in my element within all of this craziness. I felt so happy to be around people who were not staring at me because they thought or heard some horrible thing about me. I felt happy to be in a group of guys who just laughed and partied with me like I was one of them. When I went back to school in the fall for 12th grade, I walked with my head held up high. I was in a crowd that those kids could never penetrate. They would be laughed right out of the clubs. It eased my nervousness at school, and it made me friendlier because I felt happy. And little did I know, I was about to get even happier.